So how are you?
I'm good.
Good. So we've been talking a lot about online video and programmatic and all that. You're obviously very well known for pounding the table on things like addressability for television and the new age of television, right? Specifically coming from the classic definition of TV becoming much more modern. Where do we kind of sit these days? Is it closer than it's ever been before, the ability to target ads a little bit more finely and granularly versus what programmers have historically sold us? Or are we still waiting for the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, the last 2 years have been incredibly exciting because we've gone from essentially this testing phase that we were in 2006 through 2009. Then we went dark. We had no homes that were addressable. And then all of a sudden, in the last 2 years, you had satellite launch. And because of the infrastructure, as you know, in satellite, everything turns on essentially at once. So they lit up 20 million households going. I was so glad we had test and learn early so that we weren't having to invest our clients' dollars on a 20 million footprint on addressable. At the same time, you had DAI starting with Comcast and VOD, and you had Cablevision as well. So now we're up to 42 million households that you can serve just to a particular home using first-party, second-party, or third-party data.
So could you say that, here's a premise, has digital advertising and the marketing stack around digital advertising and its bleed into digital video or online video, do you think that's kind of set the table for maybe a renewed interest and maybe application to this seemingly unbreakable business of television that all of a sudden now seems to be willing to talk?
Well, I definitely think some of the elements of digital, I think of TV as digital, so I think that word is kind of misused to start with. But let's use it in the traditional way that most of the industry uses it, digital. That digital thinking is for sure going to come over to TV. But is programmatic TV going to look like programmatic display? No.
How do you think it's similar and how do you think it's dissimilar?
I think for the digital...
Given that it's still early days.
Yeah, I mean, clearly it is early days. So I have a point of view, and we'll see if I'm right in 10 years. But
well, this is a good time for posterity, so please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So I think what's important for the digital folks or the online folks to understand as they start to migrate into TV is to understand bundles and how bundles work. And that TV is around multiple bundles, whether the operator bundling channels or networks that are bundled together like scripts, or if it's the upfront bundle. So how advertising is bought is essentially 80% of it is bought in the upfront, right? And that bundle is very important to understand. It is not a million little pieces like the internet is with like essentially unlimited supply. It is a bundled offering that people like P&G started with this bundle at the beginning of television. So they have a base rate that is negotiated every year up. So if you're a new advertiser, you're going to come in at a much higher base and you're going to negotiate next year for a higher rate. But the big, huge advertisers that have been part of this bundle for 50 years have no incentive to unbundle.
That sounds very clubby to me, right? And almost antithetical to how the digital marketer looks at the world, right? Where it's about audiences, plural, much more granular, much more data-driven from lots of different data points. A lot less artificially bundled, so to speak, right? So I guess the question is, what breaks there? Is it the clubby nature of the television business that you just described, which favors the incumbents on the process and just the way it's been done? Or do you see some elements of what's basically the last 10, 15 years of digital sensibility coming into TV, maybe with some actual positive benefits versus the way it's historically been? Okay,
so it's good to break it apart. So I don't think of it as clubby as much as is smart economics, honestly. Because for P&G, or forget P&G, any big upfront player to unbundle their rates and go one by one, impression by impression, bidding makes no sense, if you ask me. So what I think is important is there's going to be a lot of aspects of digital that are going to come to TV, like addressability, and that ability to just send the message to the home that you wanted. That eliminates a lot of waste. On average, our clientele is looking for about 8% of the audience. So that Wanamaker quote from a century ago, 50% of my ads are wasted, I just don't know which 50, it's really more like 92, right? So that component is for sure coming.
So do you see that, okay, so if more intelligence around sort of the effectiveness and the 92% accuracy issue or not lack of thereof Do you see marketers, your clients, starting to actually maybe question the very medium of television versus all the granular good stuff that the digital marketing activity over the last 10, 15 years has taught us?
Oh,
right?
great question.
Is it keeping up with the digital targeting and ROI sensibilities?
Great question. So hopefully I won't give the longest answer, but SMG...
We have all the time.
What we did at SMG is we decided to centralize our addressable or our precision video practice. So I run that, and we go to market with all of our clients' money, and that's because of the operators who are the people currently controlling the inventory and the infrastructure and the data. So we go to market as SMG in order to maximize our leverage and knowledge to try and get access to best pricing, but more importantly, data. Because data is going to power the solution in the future. So we go to market that way, and the two things that we're seeing happen like over and over again, kind of across the board with our leading clients, is they want that set-top box data to be powering their attribution models. So we're working on that. That's very important. So they want to understand how all the touch points are working. I think everybody believes video is at the highest ranking of that. You know, a display ad doesn't make you cry, for sure. So I think that takes some time to get people who control the data comfortable that their media is going to be compared to other media. So there's some fear associated with that I think we're working through. The other thing that I notice on all the addressable campaigns is the first thing the clients want to do is understand, you know, did it sell? Because we are able to put specific household impressions against specific household purchases for the very first time ever. So everything we've been doing for the last 50 years with mixed media modeling, you know, tells us a lot and is very sophisticated, but the amount of data and the data that we're able to join together is exploding. So what they do is they try and understand, like, did they think addressable work? But what they're really looking at is, did TV work? And so you definitely have got some growing pains to get through kind of the old Apple's approach of MMA to the new Orange approach of, you know, census level data.
And that very much sounds like what I would hear from a digital marketing professional, right? ROI and granular. Yep. So I guess my last sort of major question is, how do you, basically sitting in a media agency, which is historically rooted and powered by television, how do you deal with this jump ball of data and ROI and metrics that the digital folks have basically spent the last 10 years or so perfecting and arguably wanting to own? Is there tension between, on the agency side, between a digital proposition, a digital agency, let's say, and a quote-unquote television agency or media shop that looks at the world through a more classic television lens?
Well, I feel fortunate that I work at SMG. I think we have a really solid digital and data and analytics team, and we're hiring aggressively. I mean, I go down on floors and I'm like, where are all the media people, right? Like, where are all digital and data and analytics people? So, I mean, we put a really heavy focus on that, and I work really closely with them. How, if I get this data from television, are we going to make the most of this for our clients? So I think we're ahead of that. But I wouldn't say that that's a traditional, like, Digitas or Razorfish, you know, combined. I think at SMG, we've got a lot of that expertise that I work with.
And of the data that you see, how much of video consumption, television consumption, is happening in sort of these outside of linear environments, non-linear,
I knew there'd be a quiz at some point.
Yeah, OTT, that kind of stuff. Is it more talk than it is real, or is it real?
So I used to have a pie chart that I used to take in excruciating detail, try and figure out how much is going to VOD and online video and how much is going to YouTube versus all the other players and time shifted. And I stopped doing that. Because, like, over the last 5 years, it's going to grow, right? It's growing, it's getting big, you can't ignore it. But it's, you know, is it 5%, is it 10%? You know, it's in that range. It's not like, holy shit, the whole thing is falling apart, but it is absolutely, you've got to pay attention.
So it doesn't matter about the actual numbers, it's just coming, and you better make sure that you're on
I've stopped focusing so much on the numbers. Kind of in the early days, what I was trying to use those numbers for was to scare everybody, you know, all our clients, all the people internally, like, look what's going to happen. And now everybody knows it's happening. So I'm not so worried about the exact percentage anymore, because I think really the industry is waking up and saying, okay, it's happening. How do we make this work to our advantage?
Scared straight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
awesome.
you.
We're out of time already.
Thank you.